Well, for more, I'm pleased to say we're joined by David Kennedy, CEO at Trusted Sec, joining us from Cleveland, Ohio. David, great to have you back on the show. Thanks so much for your time today. I just want to get your initial thoughts on what these steps from the Biden administration, the proposals they have put on the table, could mean in the way of tackling future threats.
Yeah, what this means is that it allows the United States to go after these organizations, these criminal organizations, without fear of really retribution from the governments themselves, like launching attacks on Russia, for example, because they're designated as potentially, terrorist-like type actors with from an organization perspective. So it allows us to conduct offensive operations. Here's the problem: it's kind of a half step, because what it allows us to do is essentially hack into the infrastructure to shut down these types of groups, which is definitely going on the offense. The problem is that it's not actually going after the individual people. We can't extradite them. It doesn't change that type of aspect. So, these groups will just retool. A week later, they'll be sprouting up again, doing these different types of things. Now, the big change here, though, is if they make it illegal to make payments to the ransomware groups, essentially cutting off their funding, which would have ramifications here for organizations that get ransomware. They would no longer be able to recover, but at the same time would shut the funding off. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops, but it can go that far. And if it does go that far, I think it would have a major impact on ransomware.
Okay, so do you think they should make it illegal, paying out to these, when it comes to these hack attacks? Because we all watched the situation around Colonial and thought, if they're going to pay out, then this will surely just incentivize future attacks.
Here's the major problem. So every time you pay out to these actors, they are increasing their sophistication. They're investing more money into research and development. They're getting bigger and bolder and able to hack bigger companies. So it's creating a cataclysmic effect where these ransomware groups were starting to target small companies, but now they're going after these big organizations because they made hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So, but I've also been on the same side where I've done incident response for these organizations, including DarkSide and Revil. And I've seen, literally people's entire companies, family-owned businesses crushed, people crying in rooms. It's the most devastating thing you could possibly ever imagine. And if they couldn't pay it, they would no longer be a company. So it's not an easy decision to make. If you cut the funding, it would literally shut down ransomware groups overnight. But at the same time, there would be some massive casualties here in the United States from a cyber perspective and infrastructure perspective.
Wow. So it seems to me the only real solution here is to bolster your defenses, but we know that's difficult in of itself, David. Why do you think we are seeing so many attacks take place, such big high-profile attacks, I should say, so close together? Why now?
It's particularly alarming to see what we're seeing right now, especially on critical infrastructure. 85% and more in the United States, 85% of our infrastructure, our critical infrastructure, is private sector owned, which means they're owned by corporations and companies, not the government. And we're drastically not prepared to handle the sophistication of these ransomware groups. The fact that these are so close together, we've never seen ransomware groups targeting critical infrastructure like we have, is very suspicious, to put it at least the very minimum side of the house. There's a lot of speculation right now that, while these organizations have typically run with impunity, what level of detail does the Kremlin have about the operations, who's being targeted, the individuals that are going after? And there's a lot of speculation that, hey, it's right, brand new administration. Let's test this administration. Let's go after them pretty hard from a critical infrastructure perspective, cut off gas, cut off food supply, see how much impact we can do that benefits the Kremlin, both monetary as well as, their stance on the cyber front. It all times up really well with the meeting that Putin and Biden are going to be having very soon.
David, good morning. Thank you for joining in this conversation. Is it only about Russian groups or largely about Russian groups? Or do you think that this, on the other side, on the hacking side, it could spread across?
Well, the top 5 organized crime groups that yield the most amount of revenue are located in Russia. I mean, a lot of these people drive Maseratis and Bugattis, have $5 million weddings. We know exactly who these individuals are, where they live, their spending habits. We just can't touch them. And we don't see as prolific organized crime groups than we do in Russia itself. Now, there's organized crime groups all across the world, and we have partners that we work with. And going out just recently, just 2 months ago, one of the largest organized crime groups, Emotet, was taken out by Europol and a number of international entities because they didn't reside in Russia. So, it is definitely possible for organized crime groups to reside in different locations. The problem is the safe haven that Russia provides for these organizations really creates a problem. And the largest groups that we see typically reside out of Russia and that have the most impact geopolitically to the United States and its allies.
And what do you make of the use of Bitcoin in the payments that are made to these hacking groups? Especially how difficult it is to track the trace the trail there and also crack down on it.
Yeah, cryptocurrency has made it very difficult for law enforcement to understand where the money's flowing into. A lot of the times when you look at traditional hacking crimes, you could typically follow the money of where things go. And with cryptocurrency, it makes it substantially harder for that to occur. So it has definitely made it easier. And with the boom and the rise of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin specifically from a monetary value perspective, the ransoms have grown larger and larger and larger. We've seen $5 million, $10 million, $40 million ransoms for large organizations that, literally have to buy, Bitcoin in bulk, work with a negotiator. That negotiator then pays that money. Then they're reimbursed with the fee. This is some big money business that's going on. And Bitcoin has definitely facilitated that. Now, I don't blame Bitcoin for the boom in ransomware, but it definitely has increased its ability to gain monetary value very quickly in a very difficult way to trace.
Yeah. David, just finally, you mentioned the speculation going on about Russia's role in this ahead of the meeting between Biden and Putin. And it's a delicate line here, isn't it? Because we're not talking about direct state involvement. But my question to you is, could the Kremlin put an end to this activity if they wanted to?
There is no question about it. And that's really my concern here is that, we're kind of taking a tiptoe step with Russia in this specific area. What would immediately solve this issue is by saying, listen, if you harbor ransomware groups, you're going to be held liable. And I understand that that could be a potentially escalating effort, from a political perspective with Russia. But there's no question about it. Russia could literally put a stop to this today, right now, and stop providing impunity for these organizations that are residing in its country and on behalf of the Kremlin. There's no question about it that Russia's actively involved. They're well aware of them. They're well aware of the individuals that are doing it. There's been times where these individuals have helped on behalf of the GRU, the intelligence operations within Russia. This is by far Russia's strategy. This is the Kremlin strategy, and this is definitely something where they're looking to inflict damage on the United States.
All right, and something that will make that June 16th meeting even more interesting. David, great to have you on the show. Thanks for your time. That is David Kennedy of cyber consulting firm Trusted Sec. And do stay with us. Coming up, the White House